it's Mrs. Moret with help on today's assignment, the lesson 16 practice problems. This is in your textbook on page 118, and you're just doing numbers 1 through 5. All right, so let's see here. What number should be added to the expression x squared minus 15x to result in an expression equivalent to a perfect square? All right, so we worked on this in class today, and we were making little boxes and taking our x squared term, putting it here, and then splitting this up between these two boxes. So half of 15 is 7.5. So minus 7.5x and minus 7.5x, which means then when we line the outside of the box, we would have x, and then these are negative 7.5, negative 7.5. And so when you multiply the negative 7.5 together, you get 56.25. So 56.25 is answer choice D. All right, on number 2, Noah uses the quadratic formula to solve the equation 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 4. He finds x equals negative 2.5 or 1, but when he checks his answer, he finds that neither negative 2.5 nor 1 are solutions to the equation. Here are his steps. So in his original statement here, I noticed he's defined A as 2, B as 3, and C as negative 5. However, the equation has to be set equal to 0 before you define A, B, and C. And so he skipped the first step of subtracting the 4 first. So he should have subtracted 4 from each side first. Okay, so to then solve his equation correctly, we're going to start with 2x squared plus 3x, and then subtracting the 4 from both sides makes this minus 5 a minus 9. Okay, and so now we can see that A is equal to 2, B is equal to 3, and C is equal to negative 9. So we can set up the quadratic formula. X equals negative B, so negative 3, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 9, 4AC, 4 times 2 times negative 9, and the whole thing over 2A, so 2 times 2. Okay, now we'll just do some simplifying. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root. I'm going to find that answer, the discriminant, in just a moment. And then over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so to find the discriminant, 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 9. That equals 81. All right, so the square root of 81 is 9. So I'm going to say 3 plus 9 divided by 4 and 3 minus 9 divided by 4. So 3 plus 9 is 12. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 minus 9 is -6, and -6 divided by 4 is -1.5. So those are the actual solutions. Okay, on number 3, it's kind of a long problem because there's lots of examples. But it says to solve the quadratics by the method of your choice. And I typically kind of look at, well, what's going to be like the easiest method for this particular problem? And so I tend to only use the quadratic formula when the a value is not 1. So here for D, it's a 7. For E, it's a 2. So I would use the quadratic formula for those two. But for the first one and the second one, I would solve that by completing the square. And then C doesn't have a bx term, so I would add the 15 over and square root. Okay, so let's go ahead and do those. All right, so I'm just going to draw this little box here to complete the square. And so I have x squared, and then I'm going to break apart the 2x as -1x and -1x. So I need x minus 1, x minus 1, and -1 times 1 is 1. So I would complete the square here by just adding 1 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to -1 plus 1 is 0. And then I would square root, and I would factor x minus 1 squared is equal to 0. So I'm just writing that in factored form. And now I'm just going to square root. So x minus 1 equals the positive or negative square root of 0, which is simply 0. So this is just going to have one solution. X minus 1 equals 0, so x equals 1. Okay, the next one I would also complete the square to solve. And so again, I'm going to use my little box here, figure out x squared, 4x, 4x. And so we line the box as x plus 4 times x plus 4. And then this needs to be 16. So I notice I have a plus 14 at the end of the equation. In order to make it a 16, I need to add 2. If I add 2 to the left side, I also have to add it to the right side. So now we get to solve x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 25. Now follow the same steps. I'm going to factor. I already know it's going to be x plus 4 times x plus 4, or x plus 4 squared equals 25. So since it's squared, I'm going to square root. Square root this, I get x plus 4, and it's positive or negative square root of 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. So I have two solutions to solve for. X plus 4 equals positive 5. And x plus 4 equals negative 5. All right, and so subtract the 4. I get x equals 1. And subtract the 4 here. I get negative 9. And those are the two solutions. Okay, on C, I would simply add the 15 to both sides since there isn't a bx term. I think the easiest method to solve is by using square roots. So if x squared is equal to 15, then x is equal to the positive or negative square root of 15. And since 15 is not a perfect square, just leave the answer like that. On D, since the a value is not 1, I would use the quadratic formula, and I notice it's already set equal to 0. So I can begin by stating that a is equal to 7, b is equal to negative 2, and c is equal to negative 5. So using the formula, x equals negative b. Negative negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now, remember, that needs to be in parentheses to square it, or you will get an incorrect answer. B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. So I'm going to go ahead and find the answer to this and find the answer to this. 2 times 7 is 14. And negative 2 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 2. Wait, sorry. B squared minus 4AC. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times A, which is 7, C, which is negative 5. 144. Okay. And again, the square root of 144 is 12. So we have two things to figure out now. We have to figure out, I'm kind of running out of space, but we have to figure out 2 plus 12 divided by 14 and 2 minus 12. Oops, that's a 12 divided by 14. Okay, so 2 plus 12 is 14. And divide by 14, you do get 1. And then 2 minus 12 is negative 10. So that'd be negative 10 over 14, which reduces to negative 5/7. Okay, and then finally, our last quadratic to solve here. I would also use the quadratic formula. However, it's not yet set equal to 0, so my first step would be to subtract the 8 from both sides. So we get 2x squared plus 12x minus 8 equals 0. And then we can say a is 2, b is 12, and c is negative 8. And so setting up the formula, x equals negative b, so negative 12, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 12 squared minus 4 times 2, and then c is negative 8 times negative 8 over 2a, 2 times 2. Okay, so again, we'll just find those values. So negative 12 plus or minus, I'll figure out what goes there in a minute, over 2 times 2 is 4. So now I have to find 12 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 8. 208. So 208, you can see it's not a perfect square. Looks like that. So I'm just going to keep it under the radical and distribute the divide by 4. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. and then plus or minus, and we'll just keep this part as a fraction. The square root of 208 over 4. And so we actually have two solutions represented here, -3 plus the square root of 208 over 4, and -3 minus the square root of 208 over 4. Okay, on number 4, you're just selecting which of these is set up correctly for this particular equation. So in order to select the correct one, I think it would be a good idea to add the 3 to both sides because you wouldn't use the quadratic formula until you have set the quadratic equal to 0. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0, which means our a value is 1, our b value is -4, and our c value is +3. And so if we were solving this, x equals -b, so -4 is +4. So I know D is not going to be an answer because it starts with -4. Plus or minus the square root of -4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3 over 2a, 2 times 1. Okay, so this option A has 2 times 0 on the bottom, so I know that's not going to be 1. So it's got to be one of these. And I know that the 3 is positive because you have to add it first. And so it's not going to be B. It has a -3. It's going to be C. All right, one more problem to do. This assignment got a little long because of all of that practice in the middle. But finally, which expression is equivalent to the square root of -23? So remembering back to earlier this week, we could rewrite this as the square root of -1 times 23. And since the square root of -1 is I, you could break it apart a little more. And then the square root of -1 is equal to I. And then the square root of 23 will just remain that way because 23 is not a perfect square. So that's going to be option D. All right, that is the end of your assignment. I hope that was helpful.